Welcome to episode number 46 of the MMA Rundown podcast. We had a really big event that was going on in Norfolk. It was supposed to be a vacant title fight between Deiveson Figueiredo and Joseph Benavidez. Unfortunately, Figueiredo missed weight by 2.5 pounds. So Benavidez was the only one who had a chance to win the title. They fight in the main event, and Figueiredo was able to get the finish by knockout. So I'll talk about that fight as a whole, recap the entire UFC Norfolk card, preview UFC 248, and there weren't really a lot of other smaller stories this week, so I'll go through some fight announcements as well, but that'll cover it for this podcast. So just recapping the fights that happened this week and then previewing the ones that are coming up. And that'll make this one a pretty short podcast. But starting off with the Figueiredo versus Benavidez fight. First round was pretty competitive. I think most of the judges had it for Joseph Benavidez. I think I probably would have had it for Benavidez as well. Although that's a close one, that's a tough one just because that armbar was really close. And I'm sort of the opinion that if you're really close to finishing a submission attempt, that should really count for a lot. When I look at how a fight scored, they talk about effective striking and grappling. Effective striking obviously is when you're like concussing someone or you're hurting them. They're getting rocked. They're getting dropped, and you're getting to a point where you're close to finishing them through a striking route. But effective grappling would be when you get someone into a deep submission hold and get them in a position where maybe their arms fully hyperextended, or maybe like they're getting choked and their face is turning purple, but they find a way out. I feel like they don't; those aren't scored similar. Like if I punch you and you just kind of stumble a little bit, I feel like that gets scored more than like if I have you in a deep choke where your face turns purple and you get out. And I really think it should be the other way, where the guy who's really close to finishing a submission should get more credit. So with that being said, Figueiredo I think definitely does deserve credit for that armbar attempt that he had. But Benavidez was able to get out. There were a couple of moments where it looked like where Figueiredo had him in deep trouble. Benavidez was able to find his way out of it. But on the feet, Benavidez was just kind of like coming forward, throwing a lot of wild punches. Was able to land a bunch of them too. Landed a few on Figueiredo's chin, where it's kind of surprising that Figueiredo took him so well. So overall, first round pretty competitive. Second round was going pretty competitive as well, until Benavidez goes in and they have an accidental headbutt, and then right off of that headbutt, I think Figueiredo landed one punch to the body and then was just kind of stalking him with his right hand, threw a straight. Pretty much had him knocked out at that point. Landed a few more shots on the ground, but that was it. As far as how the rules work on this, I'm not entirely sure if the ref did the right thing here. It's pretty clear that headbutt was incidental, but with that being said, I don't believe that incidental headbutts are still legal. Like I'm not saying that Figueiredo should have been punished or that Benavidez should have been punished for even initiating the headbutt, but I feel like in that kind of case where there is that sort of illegal blow, that headbutt blow, you probably should be able to stop it and just say, all right, everyone kind of get their wits about them. At least in the case of Benavidez, at least like get his cut taken care of, because that headbutt definitely did have a big effect. Even though it wasn't intentional, it still was a headbutt, and headbutts aren't legal. But instead, they continue right off of it, and right off of that headbutt, he ends up getting caught with a huge punch and knocked out. And it's pretty likely to say that that headbutt had a big effect in the finish that happened. Again, I'm not blaming Figueiredo for doing anything dirty here. I think Benavidez probably deserves more blame than Figueiredo even for the headbutt even occurring. But with that being said, part of me wonders how the rules are written in terms of something like this, where maybe it would have been better had Benavidez been given some time there because he was affected by a headbutt, and headbutts are not legal. But either way, Figueiredo was able to get the finish there. As far as what's next for Deiveson Figueiredo at this point, from what he was saying that he's made flyweight every other time he's tried. This is the one time where it hasn't worked out. No, his explanation for what happened and what was different, it was pretty much just like, well, my nutritionist told me to stop. Um, but again, the thing with weight cuts is that weight cuts aren't something that are just like it's not just done the night before a fight or like the week of the fight. A weight cut is something that you prepare for a lot longer, especially if you're cutting a lot of weight. Just in the weeks before a fight, you're really managing your calorie intake, you're managing your sodium intake. So you're doing a lot of prep work, so that on that Friday morning or on that Thursday night, everything goes smoothly. So it's not exactly clear if the failed weight cut here was that he did all the correct prep work and then just something with his body happened, or if the prep work was not correct and that's why his body wasn't able to keep up at this point in time. I would assume that in most cases it's usually that the prep work wasn't correct. So I'm assuming that Figueiredo wasn't as as disciplined as he should have been leading into this weight cut, and that's what cost him here. But the problem that the UFC has now is that Figueiredo did have a pretty dominant win there. If you're going to put him in another flyweight title fight, you don't want to get into a situation where he's going to miss weight again. Now, granted, the card I'm about to preview is going to include Yoel Romero, who recently had a title fight that he missed weight for and then won. So I guess if Yoel Romero's going to get another shot at it, I guess Figueiredo probably is going to get another shot too. As far as who it would be against, you could potentially argue that Joseph Benavidez would be the guy to run it against because the fight was so close, and you can make the headbutt argument. Um, as far as other flyweight contenders, I mean, Brandon Moreno's looked pretty good lately. I don't know if that's a fight that they want to make. Um, Alexander Pantoja had a really good fight with Figueiredo, so if that's the excuse that you need to run back Figueiredo and Pantoja, maybe that's the fight to make. There was some talk of Henry Cejudo also coming down and taking that fight. For me, Cejudo is another guy where he was a really big flyweight and had a lot of trouble making that weight. I think for Henry Cejudo, as long as he's going to be the champion at bantamweight, I don't see him really coming back down to flyweight anytime soon. I don't see why he'd want to cut the extra 10 pounds, especially if he's already getting champion money at bantamweight, and those fights seem to be drawing a lot more interest anyway. So the thought of Cejudo coming down and fighting Figueiredo, though it would be nice. I mean, maybe if he loses to Aldo, that's a fight that happens. But again, if he loses to Aldo, that's going to just be a bizarre situation at bantamweight with Aldo being the champion. But again, even if he loses to Aldo, that fight's going to be in May. We're at the beginning of March right now. I don't think they're going to wait that long to match up Figueiredo. And if Cejudo does lose to Aldo, he's probably going to need to take some time before he's ready to go again. So Cejudo's probably not going to be the guy that they're going to put Figueiredo up against. So it's probably going to be between Benavidez, Moreno, Pantoja, or someone else along those lines. As far as what I like to see, um, I mean, I really enjoyed the Pantoja fight, so just kind of as a fan, that's probably the fight that would be most exciting to me. But if they do make the Benavidez rematch, I'd be okay with that. But hopefully, whatever Figueiredo did wrong this time in his weight cut is taken care of next time, and he doesn't miss weight again. Because that would be horrible if they give him another title fight off of this, he misses weight again, and especially if he wins again. Like, this is just not a good situation. There should be a flyweight champion right now. There still isn't, and that all comes back to Deiveson Figueiredo not being able to make weight. Going through the rest of the card, we had Felicia Spencer versus Zara Farron in the co-main event. Uh, Spencer still having a lot of trouble with her boxing. It didn't look very good when she fought Megan Anderson, but she was able to take Anderson down pretty easily and beat her. I figured that'd be a big problem for her against Cyborg, and it was. But she was able to take a punch well at least, and then in this fight was struggling early on. Eventually was able to get Farron to the ground. Was able to mount her, and then from mount just kept raining down punches until the ref had to stop because Farron was just kind of like closing her eyes and looking away and was not improving position. So Spencer gets the win here, and with women's featherweight being as shallow as it is, likely puts herself in a spot for a title fight as long as Nunes wants to fight at featherweight next. Fight before that, oh my god, Ion Cutelaba versus Magomed Ankalaev. So this fight probably should have been the co-main event in terms of skill level. Ankalaev's the guy who's probably going to be finding his way into the top 15, top 10, maybe even top 5 sometime soon. Light heavyweight's not the deepest division, and Ankalaev's not even a bad fighter. That's not even like what I'm saying, but he's definitely an up-and-comer in the division, and Cutelaba is always dangerous, especially at 205, where the guy's absolutely jacked, throws really heavy. But these guys had a lot of animus towards each other, especially with Cutelaba. He was walking across the octagon before the fight even started, just kept walking past the middle. And then it's kind of funny how Ankalaev just kind of caught double underhooks on him and just kind of like pushed him against the fence, and then the security stepped in. But the fight starts, and it was pretty clear coming in that the game plan for Cutelaba was to be able to get this into a brawl. Don't let Ankalaev just strike from the outside, and then once he gets Ankalaev inside range, to try to land a big shot on him and put him out. For Ankalaev, it was more so just fighting from range. So for Cutelaba, he figured the best way to get Ankalaev to get into a brawl is for him to convince Ankalaev that he had hurt him. And then in the act of trying to get a finish, then that's when he can catch him, sort of like a rope-a-dope. So early on in the fight, Ankalaev catches a decent right hand behind the ear of Cutelaba. Cutelaba starts stumbling a little bit, but it's sort of odd and didn't look quite normal. So Ankalaev starts throwing a bunch of kicks. Pretty much every kick is blocked, but Cutelaba is still shaking around and looking like he's still hurt. So Kevin McDonald, the referee, is looking at him, trying to get an idea, like, is he fighting back here? Is he going to be okay? And in that process, he was blocking the kicks, he was throwing overhands, blocking the kicks, throwing overhands. But he kept acting like he was hurt every time he got hit, even if he was blocking it. So I guess McDonald was like, oh, this guy's probably out on his feet, I got to step in here. So he was stepping in just at a rough time where Cutelaba was in the process of throwing an overhand. Right when he steps in, Cutelaba looked like he was completely clear-headed. So it was kind of funny that Cutelaba, after the fact, was saying, hey, look, I was pretending to be injured. And it's just because we hear so many bad fighter excuses that we're like, oh, this is a really bad one. But if you watch the fight, I completely believe him. I don't think he was that hurt. He did take a couple hard punches in there. he might have been hurt a little bit, but obviously when you looked at how clear-headed he appeared to be right when the fight got stopped, relative to right before, plus he was blocking all those kicks. Now, with that being said, this kind of takes me back to a conversation I was having on Saturday morning. So I was refereeing a jiu-jitsu tournament on Saturday morning, and I was talking to one of the newer refs and talking about one of the things that I don't like about reffing kids matches is that for kids matches, you don't let the kid decide when they want to tap. Like you have to decide if a submission is tight enough, whether it's a choke or whether, especially if it's a joint lock, you have to decide whether or not that joint's in danger, and you have to step in and make sure the kid's protected. And I was saying one of the things that's annoying about that is that sometimes you'll have a kid who's just going for an absolute bullshit submission, but the other kid doesn't know how to defend it. So you kind of like get caught in this position where it's like, I shouldn't step in and give the kid a win for this awful submission, but on the other hand, the kid he's facing doesn't know how to get out of it, and if he doesn't do anything to improve his position, he actually could get hurt here. So I have to, I can't go for what techniques deserve to qualify for a finish. I have to go off of what's actually causing damage. And so there have been matches, for example, in jiu-jitsu where like someone will be in their closed guard. You'll have a guy on top of closed guard start trying to Kimura them from there. You should never be able to Kimura someone if you're inside their closed guard. But there have been kids matches where the kid on bottom will just kind of like leave their arm hanging out there, and all of a sudden it's put behind their back and it's getting bent backwards. And it's like, well, I don't want to give the kid on top a finish here for a crappy Kimura from top of closed guard. But with that being said, I need to protect the bottom kid's elbow, and if he's not properly defending it, and it's a very easy defense, then I'm gonna have to step in. And it looked like here. For Kevin McDonald, even if he does see that the kicks are blocked, he kind of has to. His job is more so to protect Kutalaba. So if he's like, well, this is weird, the kicks are being blocked, but he's acting hurt. If he believes that Kutalaba is hurt, he's like, look, this is my responsibility isn't to wait until a clean shot lands. It's to see if this guy is fighting back, if this guy is fully conscious, and if this guy can protect himself properly. And you can definitely make the argument that Kutalaba was protecting himself properly. He was getting his hands up to block the kicks. He was throwing back. He was throwing back his own offense. But on the post show on ESPN Plus, Anthony Smith was talking like, well, look, all the shots are getting blocked. You have to wait for something clean to come in. I kind of get where he's coming from that, but as a ref, your job is to protect the fighter, and even if the techniques aren't the cleanest or they shouldn't be enough to get the finish, if the fighter who's losing isn't taking it well, sometimes you kind of have to be like, well, my priority is making sure that the fighter's safe, even if these kicks aren't landing clean. Maybe it hits his forearm, and his forearm kind of like taps his chin, and maybe he's already hurt enough where that's still bugging him, even if it is blocked. Again, that's probably what Kevin McDonald's thinking, but either way, especially being able to go back and watch it on replay, you could tell this was a bad stoppage. So kind of feel bad for Kevin McDonald. It's a tough situation where you see a guy who looks like he's hurt, and he looked like that for about 10 seconds before the fight ended up being stopped, but it's tough because I feel like the moment that Kutalaba started yelling at him, I think Kevin McDonald realized he made a mistake, but the way that the rules are set up, it's not like they can just be like, oops, my bad, go back and fight again. There's talk about making this a no contest. I don't know if that's really fair to Ankalaev. Ankalaev did what he was supposed to do. If they do make it a no contest, I don't know if he's going to still keep his win money or not. That would be ridiculous for Ankalaev for him to do everything he was supposed to do. Fight gets stopped, he gets his win money, and all of a sudden that win money gets taken right back because they realize that the ref stepped in too early. So if they do make it a no contest, but they still pay Ankalaev his win money, I think that's probably the fairest way to go about it. But just a really unfortunate situation, and hopefully these guys do get to run it back sometime soon. Fight before that, we had Megan Anderson versus Norma Dumont. Dumont was making her debut. Megan Anderson was on a one-fight win streak heading into this fight, was able to get that to 2. Dumont was trying to get her to the ground, but didn't look like she was a very effective wrestler. Eventually, they get back into range. Anderson typically has a longer reach than most of the other people at flyweight. Had a much longer reach than Norma Dumont, and was able to just land a lead right cross that dropped Dumont, and she was able to get the finish right off of that. So there's some talk afterwards of possibly Megan Anderson getting the next title fight against Amanda Nunes, because she's on a 2-fight win streak, and Felicia Spencer is now on a 1-fight win streak. But with that being said, I don't know how you can put Anderson ahead of Felicia Spencer when Spencer has the head-to-head win, and that head-to-head win was pretty dominant. Again, on the post-fight show, it seemed like there was a lot of talk about how Megan Anderson looks like she's coming into her own now, which is kind of funny because she's only on a 2-fight win streak. And a lot of the problems that she had in those past fights, it's very unlikely that those have been cleaned up. Now, granted, one of her training partners was on the desk, and Anthony Smith, so I'm sure he was trying to be nice to his training partner. But Megan Anderson's one of those fighters where, if you think about the time that she spent in the sport, and then you look at like the level of skill that she has, it's just kind of mind-boggling, especially on the ground. one of the things that like bugs me to no end as an MMA fan is when I see a fighter that has like, and this isn't Megan Anderson specifically. This is more of like a just an example. But you see a fighter that has like 10 years of pro experience, and you're like, okay, well, if they're a professional MMA fighter, I would assume that they would at least train as much as like a casual person would train in a specific art. So what that would mean is like an accountant or a lawyer who trains jiu-jitsu and probably does like 3 to 4 times a week. Like I would figure that a pro MMA fighter would probably do 3 to 4 jiu-jitsu classes a week. Um, you'd figure that they'd be doing something similar as well with striking. Even if they're not sparring that much, at least like getting the pad work in, like getting some defensive drills in. So you kind of have like this expectation, like this is your job, this is your profession. So I'd imagine that you'd at least be at that level. So if you're thinking about like someone who's just like a normal professional who does jiu-jitsu for 10 years, 3 to 4 times a week, like by the end of 10 years, they're probably brown belt, if not black belt level. If you think about a pro fighter, if fighting is what you're trying to do as a pro, you should probably be closer to the black belt level, probably be a black belt after 10 years. And then striking sort of similar in terms of the level of a level of effectiveness that you'd like to see from them. But Megan Anderson's one of those people where you think about how long she's been fighting and look at the level of her jiu-jitsu, it's like you must not be training very much at all. The way that she was just completely out-grappled by Holly Holm, the way Felicia Spencer just cut right through her. And even if she is improving, I just can't see there being major improvements on the ground, which has been the main area of concern for her. So even though she might be tough for Amanda Nunes on the feet in terms of like being long and hitting hard, I would imagine that this looks somewhat similar to the Jermaine Durandamy fight, except Durandamy had much better takedown defense than Megan Anderson. But I would see Nunes taking her down and finishing her on the ground pretty quickly. As for Felicia Spencer, she doesn't box very well, so that would also be a pretty dominant win for Amanda Nunes. Spencer could be a little bit dangerous on the ground, but I don't see her getting the fight there, and the boxing discrepancy between her and Amanda Nunes is way too big. So that wouldn't go particularly well for her either. She could probably take a bunch of punches before she eventually goes out, but it would not be a pretty night for either of those two. But I think if one of them's going to get it, it's probably got to be Felicia Spencer. And the fight before that, we had Grant Dawson, who missed weight for 145. He weighed 149.5, but he fought Derek Minner. Minner was pretty close on a couple of submissions early on, including a guillotine choke. Wasn't able to get it in the second round. Really committed to a bad guillotine choke. Got caught on bottom, and eventually got finished by rear naked choke early on in the second round to Grant Dawson. So Dawson gets the win here, but after missing weight that badly, it'll be interesting to see if he gets another shot at featherweight or if they move him up to lightweight. In the prelims, we had Gabriel Silva versus Kyler Phillips. Phillips won all 3 rounds in this fight, 30-27. Brendan Allen versus Tom Breeze. I hadn't seen Breeze in a while, but this was a battle of 2 pretty good black belts. Breeze has been pretty active in the jiu-jitsu scene, at least doing some EBIs and some other events like that. But once this fight hit the mat, Brendan Allen was really, really strong from top. Was able to use a Kimura to help him pass Tom Breeze's guard. And then once he was able to get past, was just landing a bunch of shots from side control before he was eventually able to find the finish. So Brendan Allen looked really good on the Contender Series, looked really good in this fight against a pretty good opponent, beating Breeze on the ground of all places. So really good for him there. We had Sergey Spivak versus Marcin Tybura. Spivak looked really good in his fight against Tai Tuivasa, was able to take him down fairly often before eventually getting the finish. So it's going to be interesting to see how his wrestling would look against some of the other guys in the division. Wasn't very effective against Tybura, though. Even got caught on bottom in the second round against Tybura, so grappling wasn't very effective against Marcin. Striking wasn't very effective against him either, so Marcin Tybura was able to get the unanimous decision win here. Luis Pena with a unanimous decision win over Steve Garcia, 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Interesting fight between TJ Brown and Jordan Griffin, where Brown just made it his mission to keep trying to take Griffin down, even though he was exposing his neck pretty much every time he did it. Got out of some pretty tight guillotines early on. Eventually, in the second round, gets caught in another guillotine, and then as he passes, for a moment, Michael Bisping was talking about how you can't finish from a guillotine from side control, and generally that's true. There are a couple, at least if MMA gloves aren't involved, there are a couple times when that's not the case, and that's oftentimes like if you have like a high elbow grip and you're able to like get your wrist over the top of their shoulder. Even if they're passed, you can still get a tight squeeze on that. And when TJ Brown initially passed, Jordan Griffin did have that grip, so I'm like, okay, well, there's still danger here. But he did lose that grip. His choking arm ended up kind of like sliding down. But it looked like it got into a position where his bicep on his choking arm was choking on one side of the neck. But it looked like the glove kind of got caught in between, like the shoulder and sort of like the shoulder and the neck. So it was just kind of like stuck there on the other carotid artery. So it was sort of like stuck in place. So one arm, so you're choking on one side with the bicep, the other side you kind of have like the glove stuck in place. and that was able to do enough there to choke out T.J. Brown and get the finish there. I guess another way that you could get a choke from bottom there would be kind of like doing that Diesel Squeezle grip where you're grabbing your own wrist. So the choking arm grabs your own wrist, and then the wrist that you're grabbing, you're creating a fist with that hand, and you're pushing that into the other carotid artery. But it doesn't look like that's the grip that he had. It was sort of tough to tell from the angle that they had whether or not he was using a grip like that, but it looks like it was just sort of like a one-arm guillotine for the most part. And it also looks like he was kind of like pushing his hand up into that area too, sort of like a Mackenzie teen. But great finish for Jordan Griffin. We had Spike Carlisle versus Elon Cruz. Cruz was throwing some kicks from the outside. When he tried to get inside on a takedown, took a really hard elbow that may have been illegal. Not sure whether it was 12-6 or not, but it was definitely appeared to be behind the head. And then that led to him getting the finish. There's some talk of Elon Cruz going to the commission with this and trying to get it overturned. We'll see if that happens. But in the meantime, Spike Carlisle got the win. Really interesting personality that he has, called the Alpha Ginger. Has some bizarre laughter that he was displaying while they were calling up his name, while Bruce Buffer was calling his name. So he could be a guy where if he gets a nice little run in the UFC and is able to put some wins together, that he could sort of like have his own little fan base of people who like the way that he goes about his own business. But he's definitely a unique guy. Probably not Tony Ferguson unique, but he's an original. And then the first fight on the card was Sean Brady getting a win, moving to 12-0 by defeating Ishmael Nardiev. So Nardiev was a guy coming into the UFC where a lot of people expected a lot out of him, and really just hasn't had the results that a lot of people expected, but ends up losing this fight 29-28, 29-27, and 30-27. So Brady gets the win there and continues to be undefeated. All right, so next topic is going to be UFC 248. I'll run through the entire card. We'll go from bottom to top rather than top to bottom. So first fight on the card is going to be Guido Canetti versus Dana Batjurel. Don't know a whole lot about either of these guys, so I can't really give much of a preview there. Then we got Giga Chikadze versus Jamal Emmers, and Emily Whitmire versus Polyana Viana. Emily Whitmire, I feel like, is the one who I'm always going to remember as the girl who was cursing out Vinny Magalhaes after she got a win over one of Vinny's students. I think that she used to train with Vinny and wasn't terribly happy with him or the fact that he was cornering against her in that fight. But with Renato Laranja and Vinny Magalhaes sort of like being... I'm trying to think of like a good... enemies is like a basic word for it. I feel like there are some better words for it, but we'll go with enemies. But with Renato Laranja and Vinny Magalhaes sort of like being these fake enemies in the jiu-jitsu world, it was kind of funny when that happened for Renato to share that around and be like, oh, it looks like Renato finally found his dream girl. So whenever I see Emily Whitmire, that's what I think about her. But this fight with Polyana Viana will be pretty difficult for her. I think Viana's probably going to have the edge here. I think she's a slight betting favorite as well. Yeah, she is at -110. Then on the regular prelims, we have Gerald Meerschaert versus Deron Winn. So Meerschaert, pretty good grappler. Deron Winn, very high-level wrestler, but again, he's pretty short. Hasn't shown the most effective striking, and once he gets the fights to the ground, he's decent at staying out of submissions, but he's not exactly that good about like advancing position or like getting finishes from there. So in this fight, you would figure that Meerschaert's going to have the advantage on the feet. If it does go to the ground, as long as Meerschaert's attacking a lot, even if he is on bottom, I think he's going to do enough to be okay. So with him being a +120 underdog, this seems like a pretty good opportunity to make some decent money if you put some money down on Meerschaert. Don't know why I would expect the judges to give Deron Winn the edge if he's getting takedowns but not doing anything from top. And that'd really be my only concern if I'm betting, is that Deron Winn's able to take him down every round and keep him down, but by him just kind of like throwing some arm punches, that's going to do enough to win the fight in the ref's eyes, or in the judge's eyes. But I think this should be a fight that Meerschaert should win, so I'll have to make sure to put some money in on him at +120. Then we got Rodolfo Vieira making his return against Saperbek Safarov. So you kind of have like the striker versus grappler match. Rodolfo obviously is the 5-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, known for his top game. Guy's incredibly jacked. Sort of surprised that USADA has let him continue on, but you know what? If he hasn't failed a drug test, who am I to accuse him of doing any drugs? Yeah. I mean, look, you guys can watch him and you can make your own assumptions about his physique. I haven't heard anything from anyone that said that they know for a fact that he's done anything. But with that being said, his technique is still excellent. Yes, he's a very strong guy. Yes, he's a very physical guy, but his technique on the ground is great. He does have a lot of power in his hands because of how strong he is, though he's not the most technical guy in the feet. So this looks like a fight where he's going to be pretty desperate to get to the ground. Is he going to be effective in doing it? If he is, I don't see Safarov being able to keep VR off him and keep from getting finished. VR is one of those guys where once he gets you down, your best bet is for the clock to run out, or else you're probably getting submitted. So Safarov's going to really have to be able to keep Rodolfo Vieira off of him, but if not, Vieira is going to run right through him. We got Marco Madsen, former Olympic Greco-Roman wrestler from Denmark, going up against Austin Hubbard. And then the return of Sean O'Malley fighting Jose Quinones. Hopefully USADA doesn't find anything in Sean O'Malley's samples and have to take him out again. But it seems like that's been the story for him for a while now. On the main card, we have Alex Oliveira versus Max Griffin, which is an excellent fight. I think originally this was supposed to be Alex Oliveira versus Mickey Gall, which was terrible for Mickey Gall, but he got taken off of that. But Max Griffin, really good on the feet. Not the best grappler, but he's got decent wrestling defense. Granted, Colby Covington was able to run right through him and beat him a few years back, but I don't see Alex Oliveira going to that game plan. I think this fight's going to be on the feet for the most part, and it's going to be pretty wild. Then we got Neil Magny versus Li Jingliang. I feel like I haven't seen Magny fight in forever, but Li Jingliang's pretty dangerous. Probably the best men's prospect from China right now, so he'll be on the card. We got Beneil Dariush versus Drakkar Klose. And then we have two title fights after that. So Zhang Wei Li versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. As far as Zhang versus Joanna goes, Joanna, because of how long she's been in kickboxing, you can kind of tell in some of her recent fights too. It sort of feels like her long career, whether it's been the weight cuts, whether it's been the sparring, whether it's been the fights, that her chin isn't quite what it used to be. She's never really been the most powerful striker. So for her to win this fight, I don't know that I see her knocking Zhang Weili out. I do see her putting on better volume as long as she's not getting dropped and then Zhang just like goes 20 unanswered to finish. But I think as long as these guys or these girls both have their wits about them, I feel like Joanna is going to have the better volume here. The question is just going to be, is Joanna going to be able to avoid getting taking a huge shot from Zhang and having that have a major effect on the fight? If they stay standing for the most part, I think Joanna's going to do a good enough job of keeping Zhang from taking her down. It should go toward Joanna. If you think about the Joanna versus Andrade fight, Andrade was also very dangerous, and Joanna was able to do fine there and stay out of trouble. But Zhang's more technical than Andrade is. Zhang throws more straight punches that are a little bit quicker, whereas Andrade, the tells on them are a lot clearer. So if I had to pick a winner here, it's tough because usually when you're picking a winner, the question you first ask yourself is if this fight goes all 5 rounds, who probably is going to win? And I think if this fight goes 5 rounds, it's probably going to be Joanna. The question just has to be, do I think Joanna's going to be able to avoid all the big shots from Zhang? And if not, is she going to be able to handle them and be able to recover from whatever damage she takes? I'm going to say yes for now. I'm going to say that Joanna's going to be able to get her title back, but again, this is a tough one. I would not feel comfortable betting either way on it. As for the main event, you got Yoel Romero versus Israel Adesanya. I feel like I've talked about this fight a lot just because of how often this fight's had been talked about before they finally made it. So a lot of stuff I'll say now is sort of the stuff I've been saying back then. But my thoughts on this were that a lot of people are assuming that because Yoel Romero has an Olympic wrestling background, that he's just going to take down Israel Adesanya and just destroy him on the ground. The point I've had to make over and over, and I guess I have to make it again, is that there's a big difference between freestyle and folk style wrestling. And freestyle wrestling is pretty much just a game of takedowns. There are definitely a lot of points to be made on the ground if you're able to like get someone into like a leg lace position or into like a gut wrench position and kind of like spin them around. But there's a big difference between getting someone to like spin around a couple times on a mat and being able to take a guy down and constantly like chop away at his bases and keep him on the ground no matter how hard he tries to get back up. And in folk style wrestling, that's where you have to take a guy down. You have to keep him down. There's still turns in folk style just like there is in freestyle. Granted, it's a little different where in freestyle you don't have to like turn someone on their back and then like keep that back there for a while. You can just keep spinning them around, and every time that they spin, that's another 2 points. Whereas in folk style, if you spin them quickly, you might not even get any back points. But if you spin them for a short period of time, you only get a 2 count on it. If you keep them there for a while, you might get a 4 count on it. So it's a little bit more control based. But either way, the point there is that Yoel Romero comes from the freestyle background, not a folk style background. And from what we've seen in the past, he hasn't been that dominant from top when he gets there. I mean, the guy is obviously very strong, has a great base. He has had moments like in the Machida fight where he was able to land some big elbows from top, but it's not like the guy's a super technical guard passer. It's not like the guy is really good at like fighting wrists and keeping guys down once he gets him there. So even if he is able to take down Adesanya, and again, he wasn't able to take down Paulo Boashinha, but if he is able to take down Israel Adesanya, Do I think that he's going to be able to keep him there for the entirety of the round? Probably not. Do I think he's going to be able to pass his guard? I mean, maybe if he like baits Adesanya into throwing up submission and defends the submission, like I could see his Adesanya's guard getting passed if he throws up like a bad triangle, but I don't see him like breaking up in the guard, sliding, having like a perfectly clean knee slice pass through, and then like going to mount from there. Like I just see if he is able to get Adesanya down, he's probably just going to hunker down from guard, throw a few arm punches, and just try to kill some time. So I really don't see the grappling having a major effect on this fight. I think it's mostly going to be a stand-up fight. So at that point, it's just going to be a question of, is Adesanya going to be able to pick his spots here and get his reads right, where when Yoel Romero does eventually blitz, which he always does, is Adesanya going to be able to get out of the way? I think among all the guys at middleweight, Adesanya is probably the best suited to dealing with Yoel Romero's style. So I think as long as this fight stays on the feet, Adesanya is going to pick him apart. It might be difficult for him to get to a position where he's able to finish him. He might just try to outpoint him for the most part during this fight, but as long as it stays standing, I would see Adesanya having a major advantage there. If it goes to the ground, during the time it's on the ground, Yoel Romero might be winning it, but it's not as though he's going to be like, I don't see him doing major damage on the ground or setting up a finish on the ground unless Adesanya is already hurt. We have seen Adesanya hurt in the past, again, sort of like what I talked about with Joanna. When you have a long career of kickboxing and a career of cutting weight, now granted, Joanna I think is worse off than Adesanya is. You do take some damage and your chin does tend to weaken over time. There have been times where Adesanya's looked a little rough, especially in the Calvin Gastelum fight where he was on some pretty wobbly legs. Granted, he took some pretty hard shots that put him there, but Yoel Romero also can hit very hard as well. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Romero's going to catch him with something and hurt him. But if I'm talking about what's likely to happen, I think what's likely to happen is that Adesanya is going to keep this fight at range, pick him apart, and probably win a decision here, winning 4 if not 5 rounds. So last thing to talk about is going to be some fight announcements that were made. So we've talked about this one a little bit before, but I'll talk about it again. A bantamweight title fight was finally announced between Jose Aldo and Henry Cejudo. Does it make sense that Aldo is getting a title fight off of 2 losses? No. Am I going to watch it? Yeah, it's definitely going to be an exciting fight to watch. I'm definitely interested in seeing how it goes. Interested in seeing how Aldo's takedown defense holds up against Cejudo. I don't think that we're going to see vintage Aldo that throws the leg kicks. I just think he's taken so much damage over his career that it doesn't matter who he's fighting or how big the fight is. We're just not going to see a whole lot of leg kicks out of Aldo anymore. So it's primarily going to be a boxing attack from him. So the question is going to be how much does he care whether or not he does get taken down eventually by Henry Cejudo? Because if he just decides to make it like a normal boxing match and say, hey, look, if Henry wants to throw a punch and shoot under, I'm not going to like overreact every time Henry like ducks his level. I think that's probably going to be best for Jose Aldo. But if Aldo does start overreacting every time Henry changes levels, then all of a sudden that wrestling is going to play into the boxing, and it's going to make Henry's boxing a lot more effective. And if that's the case, then Henry can definitely find a way to win that fight. So it'll be interesting to fight. It'll be an interesting fight to watch. Do I think that Peter Yan or Aljamain Sterling deserve the title fight more? Absolutely, but that's the fight we have, and hopefully if Aldo does lose, then he can move back up to featherweight or even lightweight, because he did not look good leading up to that last fight he had against Marlon Moraes. It seems like it's a very unhealthy lifestyle, just trying to make the weight, and the longer he stays at bantamweight, the longer he's going to have to live that lifestyle. So I think for him, the quicker he can get done with bantamweight, the better. Whether for him that means he wins the title and then retires, or whether he loses the title and then moves back up a division and realizes that he's not going to win the bantamweight title either. Whatever it has to be, I just don't want to... We're going to see it soon, but I don't want to keep seeing pictures of Jose Aldo looking half dead while he's training for these fights. We also have Islam Makhachev finally getting an opponent announced for him. There have been so many people they've talked about giving him a fight against, but no one ever took it. But in this case, we have Alexander Hernandez, who finally accepted the fight, and that's going to be on the Brooklyn card. So that's going to be a pretty good one there. Hernandez, decent wrestling, decent striking, but I don't see him winning this fight. I think Makhachev's better than him pretty much everywhere. Hernandez is more explosive, so he definitely has a chance to land a big shot. Obviously, Hernandez got himself into the rankings in the first place with an explosive knockout against Beneil Dariush, but barring that, I just don't see this fight going particularly well for him, and I see Islam Makhachev getting a pretty easy win. And then the last fight to mention is Marlon Vera versus Eddie Wineland. So that one's going to be happening March 28th. So we get the return of Eddie Wineland. His last fight was a knockout win over Grigory Popov. And then Marlon Chito Vera was supposed to fight against Sean O'Malley, who's fighting on this card. They weren't I don't think Vera was supposed to fight on this card specifically, but on a different card. But he's been looking for some opponents recently, so he's got a pretty big name here in Eddie Wineland. Vera is trying to work his way into the top 15 right now. Wineland, I think, is at a point in his career right now where he just wants to stay active, make some decent money, and kind of set up his family for a good financial future. He's still working at the Firehouse as well, so this will, with it being a Wineland fight, pretty much every Wineland fight you guys is going to be an exciting fight. Wineland's been prepping for this one pretty well. He's been doing some stuff that's a little different than what we've seen in some past camps for him, so I'm definitely excited to see how it looks, and definitely excited to see that fight when it happens in a month from now. So that covers it for this week. Obviously, I'll be recapping UFC 248 next week. There'll be another fight card coming up the week after that to preview as well, and hopefully, unlike this week, there are going to be some more stories outside of a couple fight announcements to cover as well. Usually that's the case, but this was a bit of a different week, and that's just how it happened to work out.